Agatha Raisin and the excessively interested aunt. A quiet English village, a smiling intruder, and a trail of kindness that feels far too carefully planned. Agatha Raisin senses that something deadly is hiding behind good manners. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Agatha Raisin was halfway through telling Doris Simpson exactly why shop-bought sponge cake was an insult to the WI when a strange voice cut crisply across the table. Oh yes, Agatha has always been terribly sensitive about her looks. Agatha froze, her teacup hovering dangerously close to her mouth. The Women's Institute coffee morning went quiet in the way it always did when scandal scented the air. Doris's eyes widened with greedy delight. Agatha turned slowly. The woman seated beside Doris was unfamiliar, yet uncomfortably confident. Late 60s, perhaps, impeccably groomed, silver blonde hair swept into a sculpted helmet. Her tweed suit was London expensive rather than Cotswold practical, and she poured tea as if she owned the pot, the table, and the room. "I beg your pardon?" Agatha said. The woman smiled warmly. "Augusta Flood. Your Aunt Augusta. Well, second cousin by marriage. Technically, but family enough to care." She reached out and patted Agatha's hand. "You've filled out rather nicely, dear. Country air does that." A ripple of suppressed amusement ran round the table. Doris looked ready to burst. Agatha felt heat creep up her neck. "I don't recall inviting—" "Agatha has always been hopeless with invitations," Augusta said smoothly, turning to Mrs. Bloxby. "So impulsive, so emotional, but that's what makes her charming." Mrs. Bloxby smiled uncertainly, her gentle eyes flicking to Agatha in concern. Agatha sat down because standing would have looked hysterical. She smiled because anything else would have looked worse. "How delightful," she said through clenched teeth. "And how exactly do you know Doris?" "Oh, I made a point of introducing myself," Augusta said. "It's important to understand a place properly before settling in." Settling in. The words landed like a slap. Augusta leaned closer, lowering her voice in what she clearly thought was a conspiratorial whisper. "Agatha always did exaggerate her successes, Doris. London was very hard on her. So many men, so little commitment." Doris let out a small, thrilled sound. Agatha's mind raced. She had never mentioned Augusta to anyone in Carsley. She had barely mentioned her to herself. The woman had been a vague presence at funerals and weddings, sharp-eyed and appraising, always asking questions. Too many questions. "You seem remarkably well informed," Agatha said coldly. Augusta laughed lightly. "Your late husband was terribly frank. Poor man. He worried about you, you know, about your temper and your finances." There it was, the fair play lie, spoken softly, kindly, and impossible to contradict, without appearing defensive. Agatha pressed her lips together. The WI women watched, avid and unblinking. Mrs. Bloxby cleared her throat. "Augusta, was it? How nice that you've come to visit Carsley." "Visit?" Augusta smiled again. "Oh no, I thought I'd stay a little while. Agatha needs support. Don't you, dear? Agatha stood up abruptly, chair legs scraping. If you'll excuse me. She left to a chorus of murmured interest. At home, the kitchen smelled faintly of something floral and wrong. Agatha stared at the rearranged cupboards in horror. I hope you don't mind, Augusta called cheerfully from the sitting room. You had everything in the most inefficient places. Agatha dropped her handbag. You've been in my kitchen. And your spare room, Augusta said. Such a gloomy space, but we'll fix that. We. Hodge stalked through the doorway, stopped short at the sight of Augusta, and hissed. Augusta bent down immediately. Oh, what a scruffy little thing, she said. We'll have to improve his diet. Hodge bolted upstairs. Agatha felt a pulse of pure rage. You're not staying. Augusta looked genuinely surprised. Of course I am. I've brought a spare key. She held it up. Agatha recognized it instantly. I found it in the plant pot, Augusta added. You really are careless. Agatha poured herself a glass of wine with shaking hands. She did not offer one to Augusta. You can't just arrive and take over my life, Agatha snapped. Augusta's expression softened. My dear girl, someone has to look after you. There was a knock at the door. Bill Wong stood on the step smiling faintly. Agatha, Mrs. Bloxby asked me to bring... He stopped, taking in Augusta. Oh, hello. Augusta swept forward, hand extended. Augusta Flood, family. Bill's eyebrows rose almost imperceptibly. Agatha said nothing. She was busy trying not to scream. Later, after Bill left with a sympathetic look and an offer of dinner, Agatha retreated to the sitting room. Augusta was already there, flipping through old photo albums. Oh, you looked better then, Augusta said thoughtfully, before you tried so hard. Agatha stubbed out her cigarette with unnecessary force. Why are you really here? Augusta closed the album gently. Interest, Agatha. Proper interest. Agatha did not like the sound of that at all. That night, long after Augusta retired to the spare room she had already claimed, Agatha sat alone. The kettle clicked off. The house felt occupied in the wrong way. Hodge crept down and jumped onto her lap, kneading anxiously. Agatha stroked him, staring at the closed door opposite. Over my dead body, she muttered. Hodge purred, unimpressed by optimism. I've thrown out the chipped mug, Augusta called brightly. It was depressing. Agatha lay in bed, eyes open, already furious. It was too early for visitors, too early for opinions, and far too early for anyone to be throwing things away in her house. She lay still for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of purposeful movement downstairs. Cupboards opening, cutlery clinking, someone humming tunelessly. Agatha sat up. Her reflection in the wardrobe mirror looked exactly as she felt. Rumpled, suspicious, and older than yesterday. Downstairs, the kitchen was no longer just rearranged. Small handwritten labels sat beneath the tea, sugar, and biscuits. A typed weekly schedule lay on the table, headed Agatha. In place of her mismatched mugs sat a neat row of matching cups she did not recognize and had certainly not bought. Augusta turned pleased. "I've made things easier," she said. Agatha stared. This was no longer tidying. This was control. "You threw out my mug," Agatha said. "It was cracked," Augusta said gently. "And it made you look careless." Agatha opened her mouth, then closed it. She went straight for the kettle and found it empty. "I've booked you a hair appointment," Augusta continued. "Morton in Marsh, 10:30. They're very discreet. I told them you didn't want anything drastic. Just fresher." Agatha gripped the kettle. "You booked me an appointment." Augusta nodded. "Before it gets any worse." That did it. Agatha turned. "You are not staying." Augusta looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, Agatha, don't be silly. You clearly need help." Hodge appeared in the doorway, took one look at Augusta, and turned around again with a flick of his tail. "Even the cat's sulking," Augusta observed. "He'll have to adjust." "So will you," Agatha snapped. "Out," Augusta sighed, the sound of a woman who had been misunderstood all her life. "Let's not start the day badly." The day, Agatha thought grimly, had started yesterday. By mid-morning, Augusta had installed herself firmly at Agatha's side. She insisted on accompanying her into the village, walking half a step behind as if supervising. At the post office, she introduced herself to Mrs. Johnson as Agatha's aunt, here to keep an eye on things. At the butcher's, she murmured that Agatha really should eat less red meat at her age. Agatha smiled through clenched teeth and fantasized about pushing her into a hedge. The Red Lion was busy with lunchtime chatter. Agatha made for the bar only to find Augusta already there, chatting easily with two men she did not recognize. "And this is Agatha," Augusta said, waving her hand. "So dramatic in London. Advertising nearly killed her. Agatha nearly killed someone else instead." "She exaggerates," Augusta added kindly. "Always has." Agatha ordered a gin. Augusta declined alcohol for health reasons and accepted a lime and soda. Bill Wong arrived, took in the scene in one glance, and approached cautiously. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Perfect," Agatha said tightly. Augusta beamed at him. "You must be Bill. Agatha speaks so highly of you, such a steady influence. Pity it never went anywhere." Bill blinked. Agatha drained her glass. They took a table. Augusta talked. She talked about London, about property, about how difficult it was for women to manage alone. She spoke of Agatha as if she were absent, framing every comment as affectionate concern. Agatha felt herself shrinking, which only made her angrier. "You've done very well," Augusta said, patting Agatha's hand. "For someone so impulsive." Bill leaned in slightly. Agatha, maybe we should talk later. About boundaries, Agatha snapped. Boundaries are useless against relatives. Augusta smiled as if this were a compliment. After lunch they walked back through the village. Augusta paused outside the WI hall. "I've decided to join," she announced. Agatha stopped dead. "You've decided what?" "The committee could use organizing," Augusta said. "And I do love a village." Agatha pictured Doris Simpson's face lighting up. "You cannot just take over everything." Augusta tilted her head. "Someone has to." At home, Agatha retreated to the sitting room and lit a cigarette. Augusta opened the windows. "Fresh air," she said. "Good for you." Agatha exhaled smoke deliberately in her direction. The phone rang. Augusta answered it before Agatha could move. "Agatha Raisin's office," she said briskly. "She's very busy." Agatha leapt up. "That's my phone." Augusta handed it over. "A gentleman asking about fees. I told him you'd call back when calmer." Agatha slammed the receiver down. "You are not answering my phone." Augusta looked hurt. "I was helping." Helping. The word echoed unpleasantly. That evening, Agatha cooked nothing. She ordered takeaway, which Augusta disapproved of, and poured herself a glass of wine, which Augusta commented on. They ate in brittle silence. Later, Agatha found Augusta in the spare room, unpacking files. "What are those?" Agatha demanded. "Just notes," Augusta said lightly. "About you, about the village, about finances." Agatha felt a flicker of something colder than anger. "You're very interested," Agatha said slowly. Augusta met her gaze. "I always am." That night, Agatha sat alone in the kitchen, the house unnaturally tidy. The kettle clicked off. Hodge jumped onto the table and knocked a neatly stacked pile of napkins onto the floor. "Good," Agatha muttered, stroking him. "Someone should." Upstairs, Augusta moved about purposefully, already at home. Agatha stared into her cup, the warmth doing nothing to settle her. Help, she thought, was the most exhausting thing in the world. "Agatha, honestly, if you're going to glare like that, you'll put lines in your forehead." Agatha tightened her grip on the clipboard. She was standing at the back of the WI hall, watching her own authority dissolve in real time. Augusta stood at the front, perfectly composed, directing the rearrangement of tables with small, efficient gestures. No one argued, no one questioned. They simply obeyed. "Doris, dear, the raffle tickets would work far better by the door," Augusta said pleasantly. "Impulse generosity is such a fragile thing." Doris Simpson beamed, scuttling off at once. Agatha had suggested exactly the same thing last month and been ignored. The hall hummed with purposeful cheer. Teapots steamed. Plates of cakes appeared as if summoned. Augusta moved through it all like a general disguised as a favourite aunt, smiling, correcting, smoothing. "She's marvellous," whispered Mrs. Johnson, to no one in particular. So organized. Agatha felt a familiar, ugly tightening in her chest. Mrs. Blocksby approached quietly, hands folded. "She does have a gift," she said gently. "She's a menace," Agatha muttered. Mrs. Blocksby smiled. "Those two things are not mutually exclusive." Agatha watched as Augusta leaned in to help Mrs. Crumb adjust a display of jam jars, her voice low and encouraging. The WI women clustered around her now, seeking approval, advice, reassurance. Agatha might as well have been a badly hung coat. "Agatha always rushes these things," Augusta was saying, "so passionate. But structure is kindness, don't you think?" Several heads nodded. Agatha took a sharp breath and reminded herself that homicide was frowned upon. By the end of the afternoon, Augusta had streamlined the committee, reorganized the calendar, and volunteered to oversee the charity accounts temporarily. The applause was spontaneous and heartfelt. Agatha clapped too, because failing to would have been noticed. At the vicarage later, Mrs. Blocksby poured tea and watched Agatha with careful eyes. "You seem unsettled," she said. Agatha snorted. "She's stolen my village." Mrs. Blocksby tilted her head. "No one can steal Casserly. They can only borrow it." Agatha was unconvinced. That evening, at home, Augusta laid out paperwork on the dining table with proprietary ease. "I've taken the liberty of reviewing your household expenses," she said. "You overspend on wine." Agatha poured herself a glass. "You overspeak." Augusta smiled, unoffended. "I've also suggested a small charity drive for elderly isolation. It's so important." Agatha paused. "Why that?" Augusta shrugged lightly. "Lonely people fade, Agatha. It's terribly sad." The phone rang. Augusta answered it before Agatha could move. "Yes?" she said. She listened, her expression attentive, but curiously blank. "I see. Thank you for letting me know." She replaced the receiver carefully. "Who was that?" Agatha demanded. "London," Augusta said. "About Stanley." Agatha frowned. "Stanley who?" "Stanley Flood, my cousin, the one I stayed with before coming here." Agatha waited. "He's died," Augusta said calmly. The words landed with a dull thud. Agatha searched Augusta's face for something. Shock, grief, anything human. Found nothing. "Oh," Agatha said. "I'm sorry." Augusta nodded. He was very old, very alone. Was he ill? Not particularly. Augusta folded her hands. But age catches up. Agatha's instincts prickled. "When did you last see him?" "A few weeks ago. I helped him sort out his affairs." Agatha's eyes narrowed. "Affairs?" "Wills, papers, that sort of thing." Augusta smiled faintly. He was relieved, really. It's comforting to put things in order. Agatha said nothing. She made a mental note instead. Later she rang Bill Wong. He died, Bill said. Any details? Natural causes, Agatha replied. Apparently. Well, that happens. Yes, Agatha said. But it's the way she said it. The way she said what? Everything. Bill paused. Bill, I can ask around. Don't make it obvious, Agatha said. As she hung up, she noticed Augusta in the doorway watching her. Such a burden dealing with death, Augusta said. But someone must. Agatha slept badly. Dreams of rearranged rooms and smiling faces pressed in on her. The next morning, Augusta was already dressed reading the paper. Stanley changed his will, she remarked casually. Only recently. Agatha stopped short. Did he? Yes. Sensible man. Augusta folded the paper. He left things where they'd be appreciated. Agatha felt a flicker of something colder than irritation. At the post office, the gossip was already circulating. Did you hear? Doris whispered. Augusta's cousin passed away in London. Agatha forced a nod. Terrible. So sad, Doris continued. But he was ancient, and Augusta was so devoted. Devoted. The word stuck. At lunch in the Red Lion, Charles Fraith slid into the opposite seat, all lazy charm and curiosity. So, he drawled, your aunt's conquered Casserly. She's improved it, Agatha said sourly. Charles grinned. Dangerous sort of person, the improver. She likes lonely people, Agatha said. A bit too much. Charles raised an eyebrow. Does she? That afternoon, Augusta took a phone call in the garden, pacing slowly. Yes, she said quietly. Of course, I understand. She ended the call and noticed Agatha watching. Just business, she said. What business? Agatha asked. Family business. Agatha watched her walk back inside, composed as ever. That evening, the house was warm and tidy and wrong. Agatha sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she had not made. Hodge jumped up beside her, sniffed the air suspiciously, and turned his back pointedly toward the spare room. Agatha stroked him absently. Some people improved things, she thought. Others edited them. And Augusta Flood was doing far more than organizing the WI. Health supplements are just vitamins, Doris Simpson said sharply. People take them all the time. Agatha stared at her over the rim of her teacup. They were in the WI hall again, the tables pushed together for a planning meeting Augusta had suggested and effectively taken over. Plates of shortbread sat untouched, a sure sign of tension. They're not just vitamins if you arrive with a carrier bag full of them, Agatha said. And you give them to a man who wasn't ill. Doris sniffed. Stanley Flood was old. So am I, snapped Mrs. Johnson. And I don't want strangers improving me Augusta intervened smoothly. Now, let's not become suspicious of kindness. Stanley asked for help. I merely obliged. She said it lightly, hands folded, posture calm. She looked like reason itself. Agatha felt heat rise behind her eyes. You visited him repeatedly. Yes, Augusta said. He was lonely. And healthy, Agatha said. That can change. The WI women exchanged looks. Mrs. Bloxby cleared her throat. Perhaps we should focus on the fate arrangements, she suggested gently. Augusta smiled at her. Of course, I've already drafted a rota. Agatha ground her teeth. Later, outside, Agatha marched down the lane beside Bill Wong, who was doing his best to keep up. You were right, Bill said. Stanley Flood saw his GP 2 weeks before he died. No concerns noted. Agatha stopped short. Then why was Augusta dosing him with supplements? Bill shrugged. Some people like to feel useful. She likes to feel necessary, Agatha said. There's a difference. They resumed walking. Agatha lit a cigarette, more for emphasis than comfort. She's asking questions, Agatha continued, about money, pensions, wills. That's not illegal. No, Agatha said, but it's rude. Bill smiled faintly. That's not a crime either. At the Red Lion that evening, the questions multiplied. Augusta sat at the bar with a group of villagers, her voice low and sympathetic. And does the council provide support? She asked Mrs. Peters. Living alone can be so hard. Mrs. Peters dabbed her eyes. It is, dear. Agatha slid onto a stool beside Charles Fraith, who was watching with amused interest. She's very busy, Charles remarked. Your aunt. She's cataloguing them, Agatha said. Charles raised an eyebrow. Cataloguing what? People. Charles chuckled. I wondered. She asked me whether I'd made a will. Agatha nearly choked. What did you say? That I intend to live forever, Charles replied. She didn't laugh. Augusta glanced over and smiled at Agatha, as if sensing her attention. See? Agatha hissed. Auditing the village. Charles leaned closer. You might be overreacting. Agatha fixed him with a glare. You weren't there when she threw out my mug. That night, Agatha rang Bill again. She's building a pattern, Agatha said. Lonely people, elderly people, people with assets. That's circumstantial, Bill said. Everything is, Agatha replied, until it isn't. The next morning, Augusta knocked on Agatha's bedroom door. I'm visiting Margaret Henshaw today, she announced. She's been feeling unwell. Agatha sat up. You're what? Taking her some soup and a little advice. Agatha swung her legs out of bed. You're not. Augusta looked surprised. Agatha, don't be absurd. I'm helping. Agatha followed her to the kitchen, heart thudding. You don't know these people, Agatha said. You can't just involve yourself. Augusta poured tea. I know loneliness. It has a look, Agatha opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. Augusta was already distracted, rifling through her handbag. "Do you know," Augusta added casually, "how many people never revise their wills? It's tragic." Agatha stared at her. "You ask everyone that." Augusta smiled. "Only those who matter." Agatha went very still. By afternoon the village was humming. Augusta had been seen at the post office, the chemist, the church porch. Everywhere she went, she listened. Everywhere she listened, she sympathized. "She's so kind," Doris said later, over tea. "She really cares. She really pries," Agatha said. Doris frowned. "You're jealous?" Agatha laughed sharply. "Of her?" "Yes," Doris said. "She's calm, organized. People trust her." Agatha stood. People trusted Stanley Flood. That evening, Bill dropped by with paperwork. "There's no record of foul play," he said carefully. "Yet." Agatha paced. "She's always one step ahead." The phone rang. Augusta answered it in the hall, voice hushed. "Yes. I see. I'll come, if needed." She hung up and turned to Agatha. "My cousin Eileen isn't well," Augusta said. "I may need to travel." Agatha felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Eileen who?" "Eileen Marsh, another lonely soul." Agatha said nothing. She watched Augusta move around the house. Efficient, purposeful, kind. Later, alone in the kitchen, Agatha sat with Hodge, curled beside her. The kettle sighed softly as it cooled. "She's too polite," Agatha murmured. Hodge flicked his tail in agreement. Some questions, Agatha thought, were far more dangerous when asked nicely. "I don't see why we're going to Evesham," Bill Wong said mildly. "She's still alive." "That's exactly why," Agatha snapped. "It's much harder to lie convincingly when you're breathing." Bill glanced sideways at her as they drove. "That's not strictly true." Agatha stared ahead, jaw set. "Don't be clever." They reached the hospital just after midday. Agatha disliked hospitals on principle. Too many corridors, too much enforced politeness, and far too many people who looked as though they were waiting for permission to stop existing. She signed in briskly, ignoring the raised eyebrow of the receptionist. Margaret Henshaw lay propped up in bed, looking smaller than Agatha had imagined. White hair, papery skin, sharp eyes. She brightened when she saw Agatha. "You're Augusta's niece," she said. "The loud one." Agatha smiled thinly. "That's me." Bill hovered politely by the window as Agatha pulled up a chair. "You've been unwell," Agatha said. Margaret sniffed. "I've been bullied." Agatha leaned forward. "Tell me." Margaret hesitated, fingers twisting in the blanket. She meant well. At least that's what she said. Augusta always does. Agatha replied. Margaret sighed. She told me I was irresponsible, living alone, leaving things unsettled. She said I'd be a burden. And did she suggest a solution? Agatha asked. Margaret nodded. She brought me things, tonics, herbs, said they'd help me sleep. Agatha's stomach tightened. Did they? Margaret's mouth twitched. Too well. Bill turned from the window. Did a doctor prescribe them? No, Margaret said. Augusta did. Agatha exhaled slowly. She also talked about my will, Margaret continued. How lonely people should make things easier. For everyone. And did you? Agatha asked. Margaret shook her head. I said I needed time. Agatha straightened. Good. Margaret looked suddenly anxious. I don't want trouble. Augusta's very efficient. Agatha stood. So am I. Outside, Bill closed the door quietly. That's something, he said. That's everything, Agatha replied. She's rehearsed this. Or she's genuinely concerned. Agatha shot him a look. Bill. All right, he conceded. It's troubling. They left the hospital into bright afternoon light that felt almost offensive in its cheerfulness. Agatha lit a cigarette, then stopped herself and shoved it back into the packet. I hate hospitals, she said. You survived, Bill said gently. Margaret might not have, Agatha replied. They drove back in silence. At home, Agatha found Augusta in the sitting room, unpacking. Evesham, Augusta asked pleasantly, how is dear Margaret? She's alive, Agatha said flatly. Augusta's smile did not falter. I'm glad. You gave her supplements. Augusta tilted her head. Vitamins. She said they made her worse, Augusta sighed. Elderly people exaggerate. Agatha laughed, sharp and humorless. Funny, that's what Doris says about me. Augusta folded a cardigan carefully. I only try to help. By rearranging people's lives. Someone must, Augusta said calmly. That evening, Roy Silver arrived unannounced, scarf flamboyant, mood inquisitive. I hear you've acquired a dragon, he said cheerfully. Agatha poured him a drink. She prefers Aunt. Roy settled onto the sofa. London's buzzing. Augusta Flood has been very busy. Agatha stiffened. Busy how? Sorting things, Roy said lightly. Wills, estates, very tidy. Agatha glanced toward the hall, where Augusta's suitcase sat half open. Later, when the house was quiet, Agatha crouched beside it. The case was heavy. Inside she found folders, names, addresses, notes written in neat, precise handwriting. Margaret Henshaw, Stanley Flood, others. Agatha's pulse quickened. Looking for something? Augusta's voice came softly from behind. Agatha straightened slowly. Your hobbies. Augusta regarded her calmly. I like to be prepared. For what? Agatha demanded. For inevitability, Augusta replied. Agatha closed the case. You frighten people. Augusta smiled. I comfort them. Agatha walked away before she did something unforgivable. Later, she sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea she barely tasted. Hodge leapt onto the table, sniffed the air, and nudged her hand. "Don't worry," Agatha murmured. "I've noticed." The kettle clicked as it cooled. Upstairs, Augusta moved about methodically. Agatha stared into her cup, mind racing. This was no longer irritation. It was pattern. "That is my scarf." Agatha stood in the hallway, staring. Augusta paused at the mirror, adjusting the silk exactly as Agatha herself did when she wanted to look carelessly elegant. The effect was unsettling. Not wrong exactly, just accurate. "Oh, this old thing?" Augusta said lightly. "We have very similar taste." "We do not," Agatha snapped. Augusta smiled at their shared reflection. Family resemblance. Agatha watched her own expression appear on another face and felt an unpleasant lurch. At breakfast, Augusta buttered her toast with the same brisk, irritated efficiency Agatha used when annoyed. She sighed at the news in precisely the same place. She even tutted at the same article. Agatha abandoned her tea. "You're copying me," she said flatly. Augusta looked wounded. "I'm adapting." "To my personality?" "To the environment," Augusta replied. "It's sensible." By mid-morning, the phone rang. Augusta slid a message pad across the table without looking up. "I told him you're fully booked," she said calmly. Agatha stared. Augusta wasn't answering calls anymore. She was managing them. "She's terribly busy," Augusta added into the receiver. Agatha lunged. Too late. "Yes," Augusta continued. "I'll tell her. No, she won't be interested in a reduced fee." Agatha snatched the receiver. "Give me that." Augusta stepped back calmly. "You get overwrought by trivialities." "It was a client." He sounded tiresome. Agatha slammed the phone down. "You are not answering my calls." "I'm sparing you stress," Augusta said. "At our age." "At my age." Agatha corrected. Augusta smiled. "Exactly." At the WI Hall that afternoon, the transformation was complete. Augusta wore a tweed jacket distressingly similar to Agatha's favourite. She laughed in the same sharp bursts. She even folded her arms the same way when irritated. Doris Simpson leaned over. "It's funny how alike you are." Agatha said nothing. She was afraid of what she might say. Mrs. Blocksby watched with quiet concern. "Are you all right, Agatha?" Agatha forced a smile. "Perfectly." Augusta rose to speak. "Agatha and I were discussing the autumn fundraiser." Agatha stiffened. "We were?" Augusta nodded. "We agreed it needs a firmer hand." Agatha opened her mouth, closed it. Several heads turned expectantly toward her. "Yes," Agatha said thinly. "We did." Later, outside, Roy Silver appeared like a theatrical rescue, coat billowing, grin wide. "I leave you alone for 5 minutes," he said, "and you acquire a double." Agatha grabbed his arm. "She's doing it deliberately." Roy glanced back at Augusta, who was speaking animatedly to 2 WI women. "Darling, she's not replacing you. She's becoming you." "That's worse," Roy nodded. "Infinitely. She answers my phone. She speaks for me. She's reorganized my life. Roy patted her hand. Identity theft is always personal. That evening at the Red Lion, Augusta told a story about Agatha's London days. Agatha recognized the phrasing. It was her own. I always rushed into things, Augusta said fondly. Agatha was the same. Agatha choked on her drink. Charles Fraith slid onto the bench beside her. She's quite something. She's me, Agatha said. Only calmer. Charles smiled lazily. That would appeal to villagers. Agatha glared. You're enjoying this. A little, he admitted, but it's unsettling. At home, Agatha confronted Augusta in the sitting room. You are erasing me, Agatha said. Augusta folded a cardigan. Nonsense, I'm refining you. I don't need refinement. Everyone does, Augusta replied. Some resist. Agatha laughed, sharp and humorless. You think you know me? I observe, Augusta said. You react. Agatha turned away before she said something unforgivable. That night she sat in the kitchen, restless. Hodge jumped onto the counter, knocking over a neatly stacked pile of Augusta's papers. Good boy, Agatha murmured. The papers scattered, names, notes, crossed out remarks. One line leapt out. Agatha, volatile, needs guidance. Agatha's hand shook. The phone rang. Augusta answered upstairs. Agatha listened to the murmur of her voice. The familiar cadence now perfectly matched. Yes, I see. That's unfortunate. Agatha went very still. Augusta came down a moment later. There's been a death, she said. The solicitor rang first. Agatha's stomach dropped. Who? A cousin, Augusta said calmly. Another one. Agatha stared at her, heart hammering. Natural causes, Augusta added. Obviously. Obviously. Later, alone, Agatha sat with Hodge, curled against her. The kettle sighed softly. The house felt occupied by someone who knew her too well. You can't steal a person, Agatha muttered. Hodge flicked his tail. But someone, she thought grimly, was trying very hard to prove her wrong. Another one? Agatha said. And this time, Augusta already knew the will had changed. The word came out flat, almost bored, which worried her more than panic would have done. She stood in the kitchen, with the phone pressed to her ear, staring at a smear on the wall she had been meaning to clean for weeks. Yes, Bill Wong said. Another. Who this time? George Merriweather, Augusta's cousin, lives near Oxford. Agatha closed her eyes. Let me guess. Elderly, lived alone, recently looked after. There was a pause. Yes, Bill said. All of that. Agatha replaced the receiver slowly. Augusta was in the sitting room, rearranging bookshelves that had not needed rearranging. Hodge sat on the armchair, watching her with narrowed eyes. Bad news? Augusta asked lightly. Another cousin, Agatha said. Dead. Augusta's hand stilled for a fraction of a second, just long enough, just long. "Oh dear," she said, "poor George, he was very frail." "You saw him last month," Agatha said. Augusta nodded. "He asked me to visit. He worried about being forgotten." "And now he won't be," Agatha said. Augusta smiled faintly. "That's unkind." Agatha walked out before she said something that would echo later. By afternoon the village knew death travelled quickly in Carsley, especially death with a faintly scandalous flavour. At the post office, voices lowered. At the bakery, heads bent together. At the W.I. Hall, speculation bloomed like mould. "All these cousins, one after another," Doris Simpson said loudly. "It's not Augusta's fault they're old." "You can't blame Augusta for that." Agatha turned. "I'm not blaming her for dying." Doris sniffed. "Old people do." "So do young ones," Agatha said, less conveniently. The W.I. room hummed. Augusta sat serenely at the centre, eyes shining with unshed tears, hands folded just so. "I did everything I could," Augusta said softly. "They were all so lonely." Mrs. Blocksby touched her arm gently. "You must be exhausted." Augusta sighed. "It's a burden, caring." Agatha nearly laughed. Outside later, Bill met her by the gate. "No toxicology was ordered," he said quietly. Again, Agatha's mouth tightened, because no one asked. "Natural causes," Bill said. "On paper." "On paper," Agatha echoed. "And off it." Bill hesitated. "Timing's odd." "How odd?" "She visits. She helps. They die within weeks." Agatha felt a cold clarity settle. "That's not coincidence. That's pattern," Bill agreed. "But pattern isn't proof. It's motive," Agatha said, "and method." Back at home, Augusta answered the phone while Agatha was upstairs. "Yes, I understand," Augusta said, voice trembling just enough. "Thank you for telling me." Agatha paused on the stairs. Another call. Another notification. Another tidy ending. That evening the Red Lion buzzed. Sympathy was fashionable. Suspicion less so. "She's devoted," someone said. "She's unlucky," said another. Agatha sat with a gin she barely tasted, listening. Charles Fraith joined her, expression thoughtful. "Village is turning," he said. "Not in your favour." Agatha snorted. "It never does at first." "She looks wounded," Charles said. "That plays well." Agatha stared into her glass. "She's not wounded. She's rehearsed." At home, Mrs. Blocksby arrived with a casserole. Agatha did not want. "Be careful," Mrs. Blocksby said gently. "People don't like accusations without proof." "I'm not accusing," Agatha said. "I'm counting." Later, alone, Agatha spread dates on the kitchen table. Now she could see the spacing between them, Hodge jumped onto the table and knocked a piece of paper to the floor. Agatha stared at it. "Distance," she murmured. "That's how she does it." She gathered the papers, heart pounding with something like excitement. "If she thinks I'm paranoid," Agatha said aloud, "I might as well be useful." Hodge stretched, unimpressed but present. Agatha smiled grimly. Next time, she decided, Augusta would be interested in the wrong person. Agatha slept badly and woke decisive. She dressed with care, choosing the jacket that suggested authority rather than desperation. In the kitchen, she ignored the rearranged sugar bowl and made tea her own way. The kettle sighed. Hodge supervised from the counter, tail flicking with judgment. Augusta appeared, already composed. "You look tired," she said kindly. "Grief does that." Agatha smiled. "It does, especially when it keeps arriving." Augusta inclined her head. "Some families are unlucky." "Some people are," Agatha said. The village was noisier than usual. Sympathy had curdled into interest. Outside the post office, Doris Simpson lowered her voice theatrically. "It's awful, really," Doris said, "but accusing Augusta is unkind." "I'm not accusing," Agatha replied. "I'm noticing." Doris pursed her lips. "At your age, noticing can look like jealousy." Agatha let that pass. She had learned that arguing with Doris only fertilized her. At the WI Hall, the atmosphere tightened. Augusta stood near the window, accepting condolences with quiet dignity. Mrs. Blocksby hovered, protective but worried. "Perhaps we should leave matters to the authorities," Mrs. Blocksby suggested gently. Agatha nodded. "We are. I'm just helping them think." Augusta's eyes flickered. Agatha has always had a dramatic imagination. A few murmurs followed. Agatha felt the sting and welcomed it. Wounded martyrs thrived on pity. Hunters needed cover. Outside, Bill joined her by the notice board. "They've closed Merryweather's case," he said. "No cause for concern." Agatha smiled thinly. "Of course not." "Agatha, I know," she said. "Proof." She walked home, the lane quiet, hedges trimmed into order. Order, she thought, was Augusta's favourite disguise. Inside, the phone rang. Agatha answered this time. "Agatha Raisin," she said crisply. A woman's voice, tentative. "I was told you help people." Agatha listened, asked careful questions, took notes. When she hung up, Augusta stood in the doorway. "Another lonely soul?" Augusta asked. Agatha met her gaze. "Possibly." Augusta's smile warmed. "How good of you." That evening, Agatha laid everything out again. Dates, distances, durations. Visits never overlapped. Deaths never occurred in the same place. Everything happened at arm's length. Distance, Agatha murmured. That was how Augusta stayed safe. "Keeps the hands clean." She rang Bill. "I need you to listen," she said, and told him her theory. When she finished, there was a pause. "It's clever," Bill said slowly, "but it's still theory." "Then let's make it practical," Agatha replied. At dinner, Augusta spoke softly about kindness and responsibility. Agatha nodded, sipped wine, and offered nothing. Later, in the sitting room, Agatha made her move. "I've had a call," she said casually. "A woman in Carsley, widow, quite wealthy." Augusta's eyes sharpened, then softened. "Poor thing." "She's frightened," Agatha continued. "Confused. Wants guidance." Augusta clasped her hands. "You mustn't be overwhelmed." "I might ask you to help," Agatha said. "You're so good with arrangements." Augusta smiled, pleased and modest. "If it would ease your burden." Agatha held the smile a moment longer than necessary. That night the house settled, the kettle cooled. Augusta retired early. Agatha sat at the kitchen table. Hodge sprawled beside her, papers stacked neatly at last. "All right," she said quietly. "Let's see how interested you really are." Hodge stretched, yawned, and knocked a pen onto the floor. Agatha picked it up and smiled. Some traps, she thought, worked best at a distance. "You're enjoying this far too much." Agatha did not look up from the papers spread across her kitchen table. "I've been patient for weeks. This is my reward." Bill Wong sat opposite her, arms folded, watching with the wary expression he reserved for moments when Agatha was at her most inventive. The table was covered with neatly typed pages, a mock solicitor's letterhead, and several envelopes addressed in careful, elderly handwriting. "You're absolutely certain about this?" Bill asked. "No," Agatha said cheerfully, "but I'm hopeful." "That's not reassuring." Agatha tapped one page with her finger. "Meet Winifred Cottle, 78, lifelong spinster, retired librarian, owns her cottage outright, no close family, mild arthritis, fiercely private." Bill blinked. "You invented her." "I curated her," Agatha corrected. "Every village has 3. And she's revised her will?" "So I shall say." Agatha leaned back, pleased. "In favor of a kind, capable woman who understands loneliness." Bill sighed. "You realize this borders on entrapment." "It's bait," Agatha said. "Entrapment comes later." That afternoon Agatha put the plan into motion with theatrical subtlety. At the post office she allowed herself to be overheard by Doris Simpson. "I shouldn't be talking about it," Agatha said loudly. "Winifred's very sensitive." Doris's ears twitched. "She's frightened," Agatha continued. "Poor thing, wants to put her affairs in order. She's been asking about guidance." Doris leaned closer. "Who's advising her?" Agatha hesitated just long enough. "I said I'd find someone suitable." By evening, the rumor had spread. At home, Augusta was in the sitting room, sorting correspondence with the air of someone managing a small empire. Agatha paused deliberately in the doorway. "You won't believe the day I've had," Agatha said. Augusta looked up, attentive. "Do tell." Agatha poured herself a glass of wine and sat. Winifred Cottle rang, she's revised her will. Augusta's pen stilled, just briefly. In Casserly, Augusta asked lightly. Yes, Agatha said. Apparently she's decided she needs help. Someone trustworthy. Augusta smiled. How sensible. She's frightened of being alone, Agatha added. And she's rather well off. Augusta's eyes brightened despite herself. Agatha watched closely as Augusta leaned forward, interest sharpened beneath the concern. And who has she chosen? Augusta asked. Agatha shrugged. She asked for advice. Augusta clasped her hands. That's a great responsibility. Yes, Agatha agreed. I thought of you. The silence that followed was not long, but it was telling. Oh, Agatha, Augusta said at last, I couldn't possibly. You could, Agatha said. You're very good with arrangements. Augusta smiled modestly. If it would ease her worries, Agatha nodded. She's already mentioned wills, executors, beneficiaries. Augusta tilted her head. Has she updated it formally? Agatha's pulse quickened. She says she has. Through a solicitor? Augusta asked. Not yet, Agatha said. She's confused. Augusta's voice softened. That can be dangerous. Yes, Agatha said. It can. Over dinner, Augusta asked careful questions. Too careful. How old is the cottage? Is it listed? Does she have any debts? Any estranged relatives who might contest? Agatha answered vaguely, delighted. I only ask because mistakes cause distress, Augusta said earnestly. Of course, Agatha replied. Altruism. Augusta smiled. Someone must think of the consequences. That night, Agatha could barely sleep. The trap sat between them, invisible but humming. The next morning, Augusta was already on the phone when Agatha came downstairs. Yes, Augusta said softly. I understand. Elderly people need reassurance. Agatha poured tea noisily. I'd be happy to speak to her, Augusta continued. No charge, just kindness. Agatha took the receiver from the counter and hung it up. Who was that? She asked sweetly. Mrs. Peters, Augusta said smoothly. She's worried about her pension. Agatha smiled. You're in demand. At the W.I. Hall, later, the comedy deepened. Augusta held court, speaking gently about responsibility and care. Agatha watched the audience shift, admiration blooming. Doris leaned over. Augusta's such a comfort. Yes, Agatha said. Very comforting. When Augusta mentioned Winifred Cottle aloud, carefully, without naming names, Agatha saw it. The calculation, swift and precise. That afternoon Augusta approached her. If you like, Augusta said, I could visit your friend just to reassure her. Agatha pretended to hesitate. I wouldn't want to impose. Nonsense, Augusta said warmly. It's what family does. Agatha smiled, pulse racing. Oh, she said lightly, she'll be so grateful. That evening, alone in the kitchen, Agatha laid the papers away. Hodge jumped onto the table and pawed at an envelope. Careful, Agatha murmured. That's fiction. Hodge sniffed, uninterested. Agatha leaned back, satisfaction warming her chest. Augusta had bitten. Agatha made sure Augusta left the house first. She waited precisely 3 minutes before following, long enough to suggest trust, but not obedience. The lane was quiet, the sort of quiet that encouraged listening. Agatha walked briskly, rehearsing nothing. The best performances she knew were always unrehearsed. She found Augusta at the gate of Winifred Cottle's cottage, hand already raised to knock. Perfect, Agatha said. You're keen. Augusta turned, momentarily startled, then recovered. I thought I'd spare you the trouble. That's generous, Agatha replied. Winifred's like that. Appreciates initiative. Augusta's mouth curved. So you said. Inside, the sitting room was neat and unoccupied. Agatha had chosen it carefully, neutral, plausible, empty. Augusta looked around, assessing. She lives comfortably. On her own, Agatha said. Very attached to routine. Augusta nodded. Those are the most vulnerable. Agatha smiled. You sound experienced. Augusta sat smoothing her skirt. I've learned. Agatha perched opposite. I told her you might help with the will. Augusta's eyes sharpened. I would never interfere. Of course not, Agatha said. You'd merely advise. Augusta leaned forward. Has she made any provisions yet? Agatha pretended to think. She mentioned a codicil. Augusta's breath caught. Barely. A codicil requires witnesses, Augusta said quickly. Proper documentation. Yes, Agatha said. She wasn't sure. Augusta clasped her hands. Mistakes can be tragic. Indeed, Agatha agreed, especially when money's involved. Augusta hesitated, then said, Has she named anyone? Agatha tilted her head. She spoke very warmly of you. The relief was instantaneous and damning. Well, Augusta said, almost laughing, that's kind of her. She trusts you, Agatha said. I told her she could. Augusta straightened. Then I'll do my best. Agatha watched her closely now, the way she watched suspects when they forgot to perform. Augusta's questions came faster. How soon? Any other beneficiaries? Property values? Medical history? Agatha answered with deliberate vagueness. You're very thorough, Agatha said. Augusta smiled. Thoroughness prevents disputes, or creates opportunity, Agatha said lightly. Augusta laughed, a shade too brightly. You see monsters everywhere. Agatha stood. I see patterns. They walked back in silence. At the house, Agatha let Augusta enter first. That evening, the phone rang. Agatha answered. "Yes," she said crisply. Agatha Raisin. A hesitant voice. Elderly. Nervous. Exactly as planned. "I was told you could help me," the woman said. Agatha listened, asked careful questions, glanced at Augusta, who had gone very still. "Yes," Agatha said. "I know someone." She hung up and turned. "That was Winifred," she said. "She wants to meet you." Augusta's smile returned, radiant. "Of course she does." Agatha poured wine, hands steady. "You're doing this out of kindness," Agatha said. "Entirely," Augusta replied. Agatha raised her glass. "To altruism." Later, when Augusta retired, Agatha went to the suitcase. It was unlocked. Inside, the folders were thicker now. Names, dates, notes, margins filled with neat, decisive handwriting. Winifred Cottle's name had been added. Agatha closed the case quietly. In the kitchen, Hodge jumped onto the counter and sniffed the air. "Don't worry," Agatha murmured. "She's shown me enough." The kettle cooled with a soft click. Agatha sat satisfied. The fake will had done its job. Augusta had revealed not just interest, but appetite. And appetite, Agatha knew, always overreached. "I don't like this cupboard." Agatha said it quietly, which was unusual for her and therefore alarming. She stood in the small pantry off the kitchen, arms folded, staring at the shelves as though they might bite back. Bill Wong crouched beside her, peering at a cardboard box tucked behind tins of soup. "It's just herbs." "It's never just herbs," Agatha said. "Herbs are how people excuse things." She reached in and lifted out a brown paper packet, carefully folded and labelled in Augusta's precise hand. Valerian, hawthorn, foxglove extract. Agatha's mouth tightened. "That last one's not for tea." Bill took the packet gently. "Digitalis." "Yes," Agatha said, which, oddly enough, doesn't come free, with a smile. They worked quickly now, methodically, the way Bill always did, and Agatha only did when furious. More packets emerged, little bottles, carefully measured doses, notes clipped together with neat efficiency. "Helping people sleep," Agatha said. "Helping them rest. Helping them die politely." Bill exhaled slowly. "This is serious." "That's what I've been saying," Agatha replied. "For weeks." Bill straightened. "We need to be careful." Agatha snorted. "She's careful. We're catching up." They heard the sound of a car outside. Agatha froze. "That's her." Bill closed the cupboard gently, far too gently for Agatha's taste. They moved back into the kitchen just as the front door opened. Augusta entered, coat immaculate, expression serene. "Oh," she said pleasantly, "you're both home." Agatha leaned against the counter. We were tidying. Augusta smiled. How thoughtful. Her eyes flicked briefly towards the pantry door. Bill said nothing. He did not need to. Augusta set her handbag down carefully. I've had a long day. Helping people? Agatha asked. Always, Augusta replied. Agatha folded her arms. Then you won't mind explaining the foxglove? Augusta paused. Not long enough for anyone else to notice, long enough for Agatha. Foxglove, Augusta said lightly. Oh, that. A traditional remedy. Bill spoke gently. It's dangerous. Augusta nodded. Only if misused. And who was using it? Agatha asked. Augusta met her gaze steadily. People asked for help. Agatha laughed, sharp and sudden. You really do believe that? Augusta tilted her head. I do. Bill intervened. These substances can stop a heart. So can loneliness, Augusta said calmly. The kitchen felt smaller. Agatha stepped forward. You don't get to decide that. Augusta's smile softened. Someone must. Agatha felt a flare of something close to rage, but she held it back. Rage was for later. Proof was for now. You gave these to Stanley, Agatha said. And Margaret. And George. Augusta's eyes flickered. Allegedly. You visited them just before they died, Bill said. They were already failing, Augusta replied. I merely eased things. Agatha slammed her hand on the counter. You poisoned them. Augusta's voice cooled. I cared for them. Silence followed, heavy, deliberate. Augusta straightened her cuffs. You have no proof. Bill glanced at Agatha. We can alert the police. Augusta smiled faintly. On what grounds? Agatha leaned in. Pattern, Augusta chuckled. Coincidence. Agatha felt it then. The calm certainty. Augusta truly believed herself justified. Later, when Augusta retired upstairs, Agatha sagged into a chair. That was civil, Bill said. She likes civility, Agatha replied. It disguises teeth. Bill gathered the packets carefully. I'll take these. Discreetly, Agatha said. Bill nodded. Very. After he left, Agatha sat alone in the kitchen. The cupboard door remained slightly ajar, like an accusation. Hodge jumped onto the counter and sniffed at the space where the packets had been. Yes, Agatha murmured. Exactly. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Agatha stared at the doorway, pulse steady now, resolve hardening. Kindness, she thought, was the most useful cupboard of all, and Augusta had filled hers very carefully. Agatha did not sleep. She lay awake, listening to the house settle, each small sound magnified by suspicion. Upstairs, Augusta moved with her usual efficiency, drawers opening and closing, water running, doors shutting softly. The noises were domestic. That was the problem. Murder never announced itself. It tidied up. By morning, Agatha had reached a state of brittle calm. She found Augusta in the kitchen, already dressed, already composed, pouring tea as though nothing had happened. "You look drawn," Augusta observed kindly. "Stress will do that." Agatha accepted the cup. "So will foxglove." Augusta's hand paused for a fraction of a second. Then she smiled. "You're being dramatic again." Agatha took a sip and set the cup down untouched. "Bill has the packets." "So?" Augusta said lightly. "He's a policeman, not a botanist." Agatha leaned back. "He knows enough." Augusta met her gaze. "Do you?" The question hung between them. Agatha answered steadily. "Enough to know you didn't keep those herbs for gardening." Augusta folded her napkin carefully. "I help people sleep." "You help them stop waking up," Agatha said. Augusta sighed. "Lonely deaths are cruel. Convenient ones are worse," Agatha replied. They looked at each other across the kitchen table, two women unwilling to blink. Later that morning, Agatha walked to the vicarage. Mrs. Blocksby listened quietly, hands folded, eyes thoughtful. "You must be very sure," Mrs. Blocksby said gently. "I am," Agatha replied. "I just need help making others see it." Mrs. Blocksby nodded. "Truth is patient." Agatha smiled thinly. "So is Augusta." Back in Carsley, whispers followed Agatha like mist. Sympathy was cooling. Curiosity was rising. "She means well," someone said. "She always did," said another. At the Red Lion, Charles Fraith watched the room with lazy interest. "She's repositioning herself," he remarked. "Victim, not suspect." Agatha took a measured sip of wine. "She's good at roles." "And you?" Charles asked. "I'm better at endings," Agatha said. That afternoon Bill rang. "I've logged the substances," he said quietly. "Off the record. For now." Agatha exhaled. "Thank you." "But Agatha," Bill hesitated. "She hasn't crossed a line yet. Not legally." Agatha's voice was calm. "She will." When Agatha returned home, Augusta was packing. "Going somewhere?" Agatha asked. "Just a visit," Augusta replied. "Another cousin. Poor soul's been unwell." Agatha's blood chilled. "Which cousin?" Augusta smiled serenely. "One you haven't met." Agatha stepped aside, letting Augusta pass. At the door, Augusta paused. "You should rest," she said. "You're overwrought." Agatha smiled back. "You should be careful." Augusta's eyes flickered just once. "About what?" "Distance," Agatha said softly. "It makes people careless." Augusta left without another word. That evening, Agatha sat in the kitchen, the house suddenly quieter. Hodge curled beside her, warm and solid. The kettle cooled. The clock ticked. Agatha gathered the remaining papers and slid them into a folder. "Right," she murmured. "No more cupboards." Hodge stretched, knocking a spoon onto the floor. Agatha picked it up and smiled grimly. The police were alerted. Discreetly. And kindness, she decided, had finally run out of places to hide. You look as though you're waiting for applause. Agatha stood in the doorway of the sitting room, arms folded, watching Augusta pack with meticulous calm. Clothes were laid flat, folded with care, then placed into the suitcase as though each item had earned its position. Augusta did not look up. "I don't require approval." "That's a pity," Agatha said. "You've been angling for it for weeks." Augusta smoothed a sleeve. "I've been providing it." Agatha stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of lavender polish and restraint. Everything Augusta touched became orderly, improved, stripped of excess. "You're leaving," Agatha said. "Yes," Augusta replied. "For a time." "Running?" Augusta smiled. "Repositioning." Agatha snorted. "You always did like euphemisms." Augusta finally turned. Her expression was mild, almost fond. "You misunderstand me, Agatha. I've never hidden who I am." "No," Agatha agreed. "You've hidden who you think you are." Augusta sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded in her lap. "People waste their lives," she said calmly. "They drift. They hoard possessions they don't understand. They cling to habits long after those habits have failed them." Agatha leaned against the dresser. "And you're the solution." "Someone has to take control," Augusta said. "Order is kindness." Agatha laughed softly. "That's not kindness, that's management." Augusta tilted her head. "You of all people should appreciate intervention." "Because I'm a mess?" Agatha asked sharply. "Because you're inefficient," Augusta replied. "Talented, but chaotic, emotional. You burn energy instead of directing it." Agatha felt a flare of anger and forced it down. "You poisoned people." Augusta's eyes hardened. "I eased them." "They didn't ask you to decide when they were finished. They asked for help," Augusta said. "I gave it." Agatha pushed away from the dresser. "You gave yourself purpose." Augusta stood. "Purpose matters. So does consent." Augusta waved a hand dismissively. "Lonely people don't know what they want. They fear the wrong things. Pain, dependency, being forgotten." Agatha's voice dropped. "So you chose for them." "Yes," Augusta said simply. The certainty in her tone chilled the room. "You didn't even feel guilty," Agatha said. Augusta frowned. "Why would I? I reduced suffering." "You reduced inconvenience," Agatha snapped. Augusta stepped closer. "You're angry because I succeeded where you flounder." Agatha smiled tightly. "I flounder theatrically. You murder politely." Augusta sighed. "Such exaggeration." Agatha's phone rang. She ignored it. You think you've done me a favor, Agatha continued, that I should be grateful. Augusta nodded. You are lucky, Agatha. You have me. Agatha stared at her. That's the most frightening thing you've said yet. Augusta softened her voice. I understand you. I always have. Your vanity, your fear of age, your hunger for attention. Agatha's jaw tightened. I improved you, Augusta said. I steadied you. People listened. They listened to you, Agatha said. Exactly, Agatha laughed, sharp and brittle. You really believe that makes you necessary? It makes me useful, Augusta replied. The suitcase snapped shut. Augusta straightened and brushed invisible lint from her skirt. I won't stay where I'm unappreciated. Agatha stepped aside. You never do. As Augusta moved past her, she paused. You could come with me, Augusta said lightly. Start fresh. Less chaos. Less embarrassment. Agatha felt a surge of something hot and fierce. I'd rather be embarrassing than controlled. Augusta smiled, pitying. That's what you always say. She lifted the suitcase. Agatha watched her go, pulse steady, mind racing. This wasn't a confession. It was worse. It was philosophy. In the kitchen, Hodge jumped onto the counter as Agatha entered, tail flicking. You heard all that? Agatha muttered. Hodge yawned. Agatha poured tea she didn't want and stared at the door Augusta had just closed. She understood it now. This wasn't about money. It was about correction. And Augusta Flood had never doubted her right to correct the world. Augusta did not leave immediately. She moved through the house with deliberate slowness, as if conducting a final inspection. The hall table was straightened. A cushion was plumped. A picture frame was nudged half an inch to the left. Agatha followed, arms folded, saying nothing. There was nothing left to say. At the front door, Augusta paused, one gloved hand resting on the handle. You'll manage, she said, you always do, in your own way. Agatha raised an eyebrow. That sounded almost affectionate. It is, Augusta replied. Affection doesn't require approval. Agatha smiled thinly. Neither does guilt, apparently. Augusta ignored that. You won't convince them, she said quietly. People prefer comfort to truth. Then it's lucky I'm persuasive, Agatha said. Augusta looked at her with something like regret. You mistake stubbornness for courage. Agatha opened the door. You mistake control for virtue. They stood there a moment longer. The air between them held, taut by years of unspoken judgment. Then Augusta stepped out. The car drove away toward the hotel on the edge of the village. Agatha did not watch it go. She closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled. The house felt abruptly larger, emptier, and more itself. The phone rang. Agatha crossed the kitchen and answered. Yes? It's Bill, came the steady voice. Augusta Flood was moving out of Agatha's cottage. Yes, Agatha said. Temporarily. That's not coincidence, Bill said. No, Agatha agreed. It's retreat. She knows we're close. She knows I'm close, Agatha said. You're just the paperwork. Bill paused. What did she say? Agatha considered. Enough. After she hung up, Agatha went to the spare room. The bed was stripped, the wardrobe empty. Only the faint scent of lavender lingered, already fading. Agatha opened the window. That evening, the village reacted. At the Red Lion, sympathy split neatly down the middle. Poor woman, someone murmured. Driven out, said another. Such kindness, Doris Simpson declared loudly. Misunderstood. Agatha listened, sipping wine, saying nothing. Silence, she had learned, was often mistaken for weakness. Charles Fraith slid into the chair opposite her. She's clever. Yes, Agatha said. But she talks too much. Charles smiled. You enjoyed that. Immensely, Agatha replied. I always wanted a villain who explained herself. Mrs. Blocksby appeared later, her presence calm and grounding. Are you all right? She asked gently. Agatha nodded. She thinks she's right. Mrs. Blocksby considered this. That's often more dangerous than knowing one is wrong. Exactly, Agatha said. At home, Agatha laid out her notes again. The dates, the visits, the neatly ordered lives. Augusta's voice echoed in her head. Order is kindness. Agatha snorted aloud. Hodge jumped onto the table and sat squarely on the papers. Yes, Agatha said, stroking him. Enough organizing. She gathered the folder, slid it into her bag and set it by the door. Tomorrow she would take it to Bill, properly, officially. No more discretion for the sake of village feelings. The kettle cooled with a faint click. Agatha stood in the quiet kitchen, alone and uncorrected. You don't fix people, she said to no one in particular. You listen to them. Hodge stretched, knocked a pen to the floor and yawned. Agatha smiled, tired but steady. Augusta Flood had given her motive, without meaning to, control, and Agatha Raisin had never been very good at being controlled. If we could all sit down, Doris Simpson said sharply, we might actually finish something for once. Agatha remained standing. The W.I. hall was full, hotter than usual, heavy with perfume, wool coats and expectation. Chairs scraped, teacups rattled. Everyone knew something was coming, though no one could quite say what. Agatha cleared her throat. No, she said. We won't. The sound that followed was not silence, but shock. Doris turned, affronted. Mrs. Blocksby looked up quickly, concern knitting her brow. Agatha felt oddly calm. The decision had already been made. She was merely carrying it out. "I'd like to talk about Augusta Flood," Agatha said. A ripple ran through the room, heads turned, whispers stirred. Doris folded her arms. "That's hardly appropriate." "Neither is poisoning pensioners," Agatha replied. There it was, dropped neatly into the middle of the hall like a cracked teacup. Mrs. Johnson gasped. Someone laughed nervously. Doris flushed. "Agatha," Mrs. Blocksby said gently, "perhaps we should—" "No," Agatha said again. "We shouldn't." She moved to the front of the room, pulse steady, voice even. "3 of Augusta's relatives have had trouble in the last year," she said. 2 died. 1 nearly did. All elderly, all living alone, all visited by her shortly beforehand. "That proves nothing," Doris snapped. "Correct," Agatha said. "Which is why I kept counting." She lifted a sheet of paper. Bill later confirmed Eileen had been hospitalized after taking Augusta's supplements, but she recovered. Stanley Flood, George Merriweather, Eileen Marsh. She paused. Eileen survived. There was a murmur at that. "Augusta brought them supplements," Agatha continued. "Herbs, tonics, things meant to soothe." Mrs. Peters frowned. "Herbs are natural." "So is foxglove," Agatha said. "So is arsenic." That silenced them. At the back of the hall, the door opened quietly. Augusta Flood entered. She stopped when she saw Agatha at the front, paper in hand, the room already leaning toward her. For a moment she looked almost amused. "Well," Augusta said pleasantly, "this is dramatic." Agatha met her gaze. "You taught me." Augusta moved forward, unhurried. "I'm flattered to be so interesting." Doris jumped in at once. "This is an outrage. Augusta's been nothing but kind." Augusta smiled. "Please, Doris, let Agatha finish." That was the first crack. Subtle, but Agatha saw it. "I'm not accusing you of murder," Agatha said carefully. "I'm accusing you of pattern." Augusta's smile tightened. "Lonely people die, Agatha." "Not on your timetable," Agatha replied. A few heads turned now, interest sharpened. "You visited each of them shortly before they fell ill," Agatha said. "You asked about wills, pensions, arrangements." "That's care," Augusta said. "That's auditing," Agatha shot back. Mrs. Blocksby stood. "Augusta, dear, perhaps you should explain." Augusta inhaled slowly. "Gladly." She turned to the room, voice smooth, practiced. "I help people," she said, "when no one else bothers. I organize chaos, I reduce suffering. If that makes me suspect, so be it." Several women nodded. Agatha waited. "And yet," Agatha said, "you never visited 2 people at once." Augusta frowned slightly. "You spaced your kindness," Agatha continued. "Distance, 1 at a time, different towns, different doctors." Augusta's eyes flickered, just once. That's coincidence, Doris said loudly. Agatha smiled. So you say. Augusta laughed softly. This is paranoia. Agatha stepped closer. Then you won't mind explaining why Bill Wong logged foxglove extract from your pantry? The room froze. Augusta turned very slowly. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Agatha nodded. That's your mistake. For the first time, Augusta's composure slipped. Not much. Just enough. Her hand tightened on her handbag. Her breath came a shade too fast. Agatha felt the shift ripple outward. Something had changed. Augusta recovered quickly. Too quickly. She straightened her shoulders and smiled. The familiar expression of calm competence settling back into place, like a mask she had worn for years. This is absurd, she said. Herbal preparations are legal. Foxglove grows in half the gardens here. Yes, Agatha said. But you didn't grow it. You measured it. A murmur rippled through the hall. Teacups were forgotten. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward. Augusta's smile thinned. You have no proof I administered anything? Agatha nodded. Not yet. Mrs. Blocksby stepped forward, voice gentle but firm. Augusta, why did you ask Mrs. Peters about executors last month? Augusta turned, surprised. I was being helpful. And why did you ask me about contesting wills? Another woman called. And me about probate, someone added. Augusta raised her hands. I organize affairs. People asked. Agatha shook her head. They didn't ask. You offered. Augusta's voice sharpened. Because no one else would. That's the line you always use, Agatha said. You decide who needs you. Then you insert yourself. Augusta laughed suddenly. You're jealous. There it was. The word landed badly. Doris Simpson blinked. Mrs. Peters frowned. A few heads tilted. Agatha smiled. Thank you. Augusta hesitated. Just a fraction too long. You always do this, Augusta said, irritation bleeding through. You turn things into performances. You want attention. Agatha stepped closer. No, I want you to stop. Augusta's control slipped again. Her voice rose. Stop what? Helping? You didn't help them, Agatha said quietly. You corrected them. Augusta stared at her. Someone had to. The hall went very still. Mrs. Blocksby whispered, "Oh, Augusta." Augusta realized what she had said too late. She straightened, attempting to recover. You meant exactly that, Agatha said. You decided their lives were inefficient. That's not what You decided when they were finished, Agatha said, voice steady. And you thought that made you kind. Silence pressed in from all sides now. Even Doris Simpson had gone quiet. Agatha heard footsteps in the corridor, measured, official. At the back of the hall, the door opened. Bill Wong stepped inside, accompanied by another officer. Their presence was unassuming, deliberate. Bill met Agatha's eyes and gave the smallest nod. Augusta turned slowly. "Oh," she said, "how theatrical." Bill spoke calmly. "Augusta Flood, we need to ask you some questions." "This is harassment," Augusta snapped. Bill didn't move. "It's procedure." Augusta looked around the room, searching for allies. Faces slid away from her gaze. Sympathy had evaporated, leaving only discomfort. "You're all ungrateful," Augusta said sharply. "I did what you wouldn't." Agatha folded her arms. "You did what you wanted." Augusta's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Bill gestured toward the door. "If you'll come with us." Augusta lifted her chin. "I've done nothing illegal." "Then you have nothing to fear," Bill replied. As they led her out, Augusta turned back to Agatha. "You could have been better," she said bitterly. "You chose chaos." Agatha smiled faintly. "I chose people." The door closed. The WI hall exhaled. Chairs scraped. Someone poured tea with shaking hands. Doris Simpson sat down heavily. "Well," Doris said weakly, "that was unexpected." Mrs. Bloxby touched Agatha's arm. "You did the right thing." Agatha nodded, suddenly exhausted. "I know." Outside, the evening settled into Casserly with deceptive normality. The lane was quiet. Lights glowed in cottage windows. Life continued as it always did. At home, Agatha dropped her bag by the door and went straight to the kitchen. Hodge greeted her with a reproachful meow. "Yes," Agatha murmured, rubbing his head. "I'm late." She filled the kettle and stood waiting as it heated, hands steady now. The house felt like hers again, untidy, human. The kettle clicked off. Agatha poured the water, breathed in the steam, and allowed herself one small smile. Order, she thought, was overrated. Hodge stretched, jumped onto the counter, and knocked a teaspoon onto the floor. Agatha picked it up and laughed softly. "Exactly," she said. "Well," Doris Simpson said faintly, "I never thought it would come to that." Agatha did not answer. They stood outside the WI hall, the double doors still ajar behind them, voices buzzing inside like disturbed bees. Someone had started stacking chairs with unnecessary energy. Someone else was crying quietly, though whether from shock or embarrassment was unclear. Across the lane, Bill Wong spoke calmly to Augusta Flood. Augusta stood straight-backed, handbag looped over her arm, expression composed enough for a church photograph. If she felt outrage or fear, she did not show it. She listened with polite attention, nodding occasionally, as though receiving directions to a luncheon. Agatha watched closely. "She doesn't even look surprised," Doris whispered. "That's because she isn't," Agatha said. "She's been expecting this since yesterday." Doris swallowed. But she was so nice. Yes, Agatha replied. That was the point. Bill gestured gently toward the car. Augusta moved without protest. She paused only once, turning her head slightly. Her gaze met Agatha's. For a moment there was something almost conversational in it, a final acknowledgement between women who had understood each other far too well. Then Augusta smiled, not warmly, not bitterly, politely. The door closed. The engine started, and Augusta Flood was driven away from Carsley at exactly the speed limit. Silence settled in her wake. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed too loudly, then stopped. Well, Doris said again, searching for footing, I suppose we were all mistaken. Agatha raised an eyebrow. Speak for yourself. Mrs. Blocksby stepped closer, her face pale but composed. Agatha, are you all right? Agatha considered. Her hands were steady. Her pulse had slowed. Yes, she said. I think so. They walked home together, the village oddly subdued. Curtains twitched, then stilled. People who had rushed to the doors a quarter-hour earlier now retreated, the excitement already turning uncomfortable. Order had fractured. It would take time to settle again. At Agatha's cottage, Bill was already inside, jacket off, expression tired but satisfied. She didn't resist, he said. She even thanked us. Agatha snorted. Of course she did. We've got enough to hold her, Bill continued. Herbal preparations, notes, patterns, and now witnesses. Plenty of witnesses, Agatha said dryly. Bill hesitated. She didn't confess. No, Agatha agreed. She never would. Bill looked thoughtful. Some people don't see themselves as criminals. They see themselves as managers, Agatha said. Bill smiled faintly. You did good work. Agatha waved that away. I did irritating work. The village will forgive me in a week. And you? Bill asked. Agatha paused. I'll forgive myself sooner. He nodded, accepting that. After he left, the house felt unusually quiet. Agatha moved through it slowly, touching things Augusta had rearranged and then left behind. The sugar bowl was back in the wrong place. Agatha put it where she liked it. A cushion sat too upright. She punched it into submission. In the kitchen, she filled the kettle and waited. Leaning against the counter, Hodge jumped up beside her, tail high. Yes, Agatha murmured. It's over. Hodge sniffed, unimpressed. The kettle clicked off. Agatha poured the water, steam rising, comforting and ordinary. She stood there a moment longer than necessary, letting the normality soak back in. Later, at the Red Lion, the village attempted to reassemble itself. She fooled us, someone said. She meant well, someone else insisted. Charles Fraith lifted his glass. Intentions are notoriously unreliable. Roy Silver laughed. Darling, if niceness were proof, half of London would be in prison. Agatha smiled into her wine. Doris Simpson approached cautiously. I suppose you were right. Agatha tilted her head. You suppose? Doris sighed. I suppose you were right. That's quite enough triumph for one day, Agatha said. Outside, night settled gently over Castle. Lamps glowed, doors shut. Life resumed its familiar rhythm, bruised but intact. Agatha walked home alone, heels clicking on the stones, thoughts quieter now. Justice, she reflected, rarely arrived dramatically. Sometimes it arrived politely. The next morning, Castle woke cautiously. Agatha noticed it at once. Doors opened a little later. Greetings were shorter. The village had the air of someone nursing a mild but persistent headache, uncertain whether to apologize or complain. At the post office, conversation stalled when Agatha entered, then lurched back into motion with exaggerated cheer. "Morning, Agatha," Doris Simpson said too brightly. "Lovely day," Agatha nodded. "Is it?" Doris hesitated. "Well, brighter." Agatha collected her stamps and left without comment. Victory, she had learned, was best enjoyed quietly. At home the phone rang before she had finished her tea. "It's Mrs. Bloxby," came the gentle voice. "I wondered if you might like to walk." Agatha did. They took the lane past the vicarage, hedges trimmed and obedient, the world appearing unchanged, despite everything. "People are shaken," Mrs. Bloxby said softly. "They don't like discovering they were wrong." "They weren't wrong," Agatha replied. "They were comfortable." Mrs. Bloxby smiled sadly. "Yes, comfort can be persuasive." They walked on. "She never raised her voice," Mrs. Bloxby said. "Even yesterday." "No," Agatha agreed. She thought politeness was protection. "And you?" Agatha shrugged. "I never trusted manners." At the edge of the lane they paused. "You were brave," Mrs. Bloxby said. Agatha snorted. "I was annoyed." Mrs. Bloxby laughed. "Sometimes that's better." That afternoon Bill rang again. "She's been charged," he said. "It will take time, statements, forensics, but it's moving." Agatha closed her eyes briefly. "Good." "She asked after you," Bill added. Agatha opened one eye. "Of course she did." "She said you were misguided but energetic." Agatha smiled. "I'll have that engraved." At the Red Lion that evening, the village attempted something like normality. Laughter returned, cautiously at first, then with relief. "She had us all fooled," someone said. "She didn't fool Agatha," Roy Silver replied grandly. "Which is why we keep her." Agatha raised her glass. "I feel appreciated." Charles Fraith leaned in. "You realize, of course, that in 6 months this will be a legend." Agatha grimaced. "I hate legends." "You love surviving them," Charles said. Later, alone at home, Agatha moved through the house one last time, checking corners, opening cupboards, reclaiming space. The pantry smelled only of tea and biscuits now. No neat packets, no helpful labels. She sat at the kitchen table, exhaustion settling in properly at last. "Well," she said aloud, "that was exhausting." Hodge jumped onto the table, turned in a circle, and sat directly on her notes. Yes, Agatha murmured, scratching his head. Paperwork's finished. The kettle sighed as it cooled. The clock ticked. Ordinary sounds restored. Agatha leaned back, letting the quiet settle around her. She thought of Augusta Flood. So calm, so certain, so sure of her right to arrange other people's endings. Order, Agatha reflected, was a dangerous obsession. Messiness, on the other hand, allowed room for forgiveness, error, and survival. She stood stretched and glanced around her imperfect kitchen. I prefer it this way, she said. Hodge yawned and knocked a teaspoon to the floor. Agatha picked it up and smiled. Nicely done, she told herself. You do realize, Roy Silver said, that half the village is pretending nothing happened. Agatha looked up from her coffee. Only half? That's progress. They sat at a small table outside the cafe in Mercester, a deliberate escape from Carsley's lanes and listening hedges. Roy wore sunglasses far too dramatic for a quiet morning. Charles Fraith lounged opposite, jacket unbuttoned, expression lazily observant. Carsley thrives on denial, Charles said. It's practically a hobby. Agatha stirred her coffee without drinking it. They'll talk themselves into amnesia by the weekend. Roy laughed. You've ruined everyone's favourite pastime. I've improved it, Agatha said. Now the gossip has teeth. Back in Carsley, the village was indeed buzzing, quietly, insistently. Conversation stopped and started around Agatha like badly tuned radios. At the post office, Doris Simpson leaned across the counter. I hear Augusta's solicitor is very good. I hear you're still nosy, Agatha replied mildly. Doris flushed. Well, one must keep informed. You could try knitting, Agatha said. It's quieter. Doris sniffed and rang up the stamps with unnecessary force. At the W.I. Hall, the atmosphere had shifted. Chairs were arranged with care. Tea poured with exaggerated politeness. No one quite knew where Agatha now belonged, guest, authority, or inconvenience. Mrs. Blocksby approached her gently. How are you feeling today? Agatha considered. Vindicated, tired, hungry. Mrs. Blocksby smiled. In that order? Depends on the biscuit selection. They sat together while the room hummed. It's strange, Mrs. Blocksby said. People trusted her. People trust calm, Agatha replied. It saves effort. And you? Mrs. Blocksby asked. Agatha hesitated. I don't trust myself when things go quiet. Mrs. Blocksby touched her arm. Quiet doesn't erase purpose. Agatha nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Later, walking home, Agatha noticed the small absences. No lavender polish smell drifting from an open window. No neatly aligned plant pots. The village looked the same, but felt less supervised. At home she dropped her bag and stood in the kitchen, suddenly unsure what to do next. Well, she said aloud, that's that. Hodge jumped onto the counter and stared at her. Yes, Agatha said. You're right. It never is. The phone rang. Bill Wong's voice came through, steady as ever. "Just checking in." "I'm upright," Agatha said. "Mostly civil." "There'll be statements," Bill said. "Court dates. It will drag." Agatha sighed. "It always does." "You okay with that?" "No," Agatha said. "But I rarely am." After the call, she poured a glass of wine and carried it into the sitting room. She sat without turning on the radio. Silence felt earned, but also uncomfortable. Her mind kept circling back, not to Augusta, but to herself. She had been right. That mattered. It just didn't feel as satisfying as she'd imagined. That evening, Carsley attempted cheerfulness. The Red Lion filled, laughter a shade louder than necessary. "To Agatha," Roy toasted, "protector of the elderly." Agatha winced. "Please don't make that a title." Charles raised his glass. "Village nuisance, then." "Much better," Agatha said. Doris Simpson hovered nearby, clearly torn between admiration and resentment. "I suppose you did what had to be done," Doris said stiffly. Agatha smiled. "I usually do." Walking home later, the lanes were quiet, the cottages glowing softly. Carsley was healing itself in the only way it knew, by pretending nothing too uncomfortable lingered. Agatha unlocked her door and paused, hand on the latch. Vindication, she thought, was overrated. What mattered was what came after. She went inside, closed the door gently and leaned against it. Suddenly very tired. Agatha slept late the next morning and did not apologize to herself for it. When she finally emerged into the kitchen, the house felt unhurried. The kettle waited. The cat waited. No one else made demands. It was a novelty. She filled the kettle and stood watching it, arms folded, thinking of nothing in particular. Thinking, she realized, was overrated after a case ended. Thinking invited questions. Silence allowed healing, or something like it. Hodge jumped onto the counter and sniffed the air. "Yes," Agatha said, "it's still mine." She poured tea and took it into the sitting room, where Augusta's influence had finally evaporated. Cushions slouched. Papers sat untidily on the side table. The room looked human again. At mid-morning there was a knock. Agatha opened the door to find Mrs. Bloxby, coat buttoned, expression warm but cautious. "I thought you might like company," Mrs. Bloxby said. Agatha stepped aside. "Only if you promise not to improve anything." Mrs. Bloxby smiled and sat. "Carsley is finding its balance again." Agatha snorted. "It never had one." "They're talking," Mrs. Bloxby said. "They always are." "Yes," Mrs. Bloxby agreed. "But differently." Agatha listened. Perhaps that was true. Gossip had shifted tone, from admiration to scrutiny, from blind trust to wary curiosity. It was uncomfortable, necessary. "You changed something," Mrs. Bloxby said gently. Agatha looked down at her teacup. "I exposed something." "That's a kind of change." Agatha shrugged. "I don't feel noble." Mrs. Bloxby laughed softly. "Good. Nobility is exhausting." After she left, Agatha went for a walk, alone. The lanes were quiet. A tractor passed. Someone waved, hesitated, then waved again. At the corner by the post office, Doris Simpson appeared, clutching a parcel. "I suppose," Doris said stiffly, "that I should thank you." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For not making a fuss afterward," Doris said. "Some people would." Agatha smiled faintly. "I've made enough fuss for one lifetime." Doris nodded, clearly relieved, and retreated. By afternoon the village had settled into its old rhythms, adjusted but intact. Carsley was very good at absorbing shocks, provided they didn't require lasting self-examination. Agatha returned home, oddly grateful for that. In the early evening, Bill rang again. "They've moved her," he said, "closer to London." Agatha closed her eyes briefly. "Good." "You did the right thing," Bill added. "Yes," Agatha said, "but it still feels messy." Bill laughed quietly. "Justice usually is." After the call, Agatha opened a bottle of wine and poured one glass. She carried it into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, alone with the small sounds of the house. She thought about Augusta Flood, about certainty, entitlement, and the frightening comfort of believing oneself necessary. She thought about herself. Vindication did not erase loneliness. Solving things did not fill rooms. Victory was brief, quiet lingered. Hodge jumped down from his chair and rubbed against her ankle. "Yes," Agatha murmured, bending to stroke him. "I know." She sat at the kitchen table, papers pushed aside, and let herself feel it properly this time. The tiredness, the melancholy, the faint disappointment that always followed triumph. Then she sighed and stood. "Well," she said aloud, "enough wallowing." She rinsed her glass, tidied one corner of the table, and deliberately left the rest alone. Outside, Carsley glowed softly, forgiving itself. Agatha switched off the light and paused in the doorway. "I was right," she said quietly. "That will have to be enough." Hodge stretched, yawned, and knocked a pen onto the floor. Agatha picked it up and smiled. "Exactly," she said. "Don't touch that." Agatha said it sharply enough to stop Doris Simpson mid-reach. They stood in the W.I. Hall kitchen, where someone, Doris, had decided that helping involved rearranging cupboards again. The sugar was migrating. The mugs were being alphabetized. Order, Agatha had learned, crept back in if left unattended. Doris drew herself up. "I was only trying to help." "I know," Agatha said. "That's what worries me." There was a pause. Then Doris sniffed and withdrew her hand. "Well," she said, "if you're taking charge." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "I always was." That settled it. Doris retreated, mildly offended, and Agatha felt an unexpected lift in her chest. Not triumph, something quieter, ownership. Later that morning, Agatha walked home with a brisk sense of purpose. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and stopped. The house still bore traces of Augusta's careful tyranny, straightened books, aligned cushions, an empty neatness that suggested judgment. Agatha put her handbag down and surveyed the room. "No," she said aloud. She crossed to the side table and deliberately knocked a stack of magazines askew. Then she shifted a chair half an inch out of line. She left a scarf draped where it fell. Better. In the kitchen she opened cupboards and checked shelves. Tea where she wanted it. biscuits visible, not hidden. She moved the fruit bowl back to the corner Augusta had disapproved of. Hodge watched from the counter. "Yes," Agatha said. "We're reclaiming." Hodge flicked his tail, approving. The phone rang. Roy Silver's voice burst through. "Darling, I hear you're reintegrating into society." "I never left it," Agatha said. "I was temporarily corrected." Roy laughed. "Lunch?" Agatha considered. Yes, somewhere visible. By noon she was seated at the Red Lion, coat draped carelessly, posture relaxed. The village noticed. Of course it did. Roy held court. Charles Fraith lounged nearby, amused. "You look restored," Charles observed. "I look myself," Agatha replied. Roy clinked his glass. "To space, reclaimed and defended." Agatha smiled. "I might embroider that." Conversation flowed, light, normal. Someone mentioned a fate. Someone else mentioned a rumor. Agatha listened without intervening. That, too, felt like control. Across the room, Doris Simpson hovered, clearly unsure whether to approach. Agatha caught her eye. Doris hesitated, then came over. "I wanted to say," Doris began stiffly, "that perhaps I was a little overbearing before." Agatha sipped her wine. "Perhaps," Doris winced. "Well, we're glad you're still here." Agatha met her gaze. "So am I." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was peace enough. That afternoon Agatha returned home and did something radical. She threw things away, not carefully, not selectively, decisively. Old leaflets, unnecessary papers, a cardigan she hated but had kept out of guilt. She filled a bin bag and tied it with satisfaction. Order, she decided, was acceptable when chosen. In the early evening, Bill Wong stopped by. He leaned in the doorway, relaxed. "You seem lighter," he said. "I've removed a moral parasite," Agatha replied. Bill smiled. "That helps." They talked briefly, nothing urgent. The case was moving forward. Augusta was no longer her problem. When Bill left, Agatha stood alone in the kitchen again, but this time the solitude felt deliberate. She poured a glass of wine and carried it into the sitting room. The chair was crooked. She left it that way. Hodge jumped onto her lap without invitation. "Yes," Agatha murmured, stroking him. "This is better." Outside, Casserly carried on. Inside, Agatha Raisin occupied her own space again, and she had no intention of surrendering it. Agatha woke the next morning with a sense of mild irritation, and took it as a good sign. Irritation meant engagement. Engagement meant life. She lay still for a moment, listening to the house. No footsteps upstairs, no careful rearranging, no quiet disapproval breathing down the corridors. Excellent. She swung her legs out of bed and caught sight of herself in the mirror, hair slightly unruly, face unmistakably her own. She smiled at it briefly, then turned away before sentimentality could take hold. Downstairs, Hodge was already waiting, sitting squarely in the middle of the kitchen floor, as though guarding territory. "Yes," Agatha said, "I know. It's ours." She fed him, then herself, and made no attempt to clear up immediately. The dishes could wait. Space, she was learning, included time. Late morning brought another test. The doorbell rang. Agatha opened it to find Doris Simpson holding a plate of biscuits. "I thought," Doris said stiffly, "that you might like these." Agatha examined the plate. "Homemade?" Doris nodded. "I didn't rearrange anything." Agatha stepped aside. "Come in, then." They sat at the kitchen table. Doris perched, tense, like a guest uncertain of her welcome. "I suppose," Doris said after a moment, "that you'll be back to running things." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "I never ran them. I survived them." Doris frowned, considering this. "Well, just so long as everyone knows where they stand." Agatha smiled thinly. "That's usually the problem." Doris flushed, then surprised her by laughing. "You are difficult." "Yes," Agatha agreed. "It's kept me alive." Doris left shortly after, biscuits untouched, but intentions noted. Agatha watched her go with a sense of closure she hadn't expected. In the afternoon, Agatha went shopping, not out of necessity but visibility. She walked the village deliberately, stopping to talk where she chose, ignoring where she didn't. At the post office, conversations resumed around her, without faltering. At the bakery, someone asked her opinion. She gave it. Reclaiming space, she realized, wasn't dramatic. It was cumulative. That evening, she hosted. Not a dinner party, she wasn't mad, but drinks. A few people. Enough noise to assert occupation. Roy arrived first, flamboyant as ever. Charles followed, amused. Mrs. Blocksby came bearing calm and cake. Even Bill stopped by briefly, leaning against the counter, comfortable. "You've reset the balance," Mrs. Blocksby observed quietly. Agatha shrugged. "I've tipped it back." Laughter filled the sitting room. Glasses clinked. The house absorbed it gratefully. At one point Roy surveyed the room. "You know, darling, she would have hated this." Agatha grinned. "That's why I'm doing it." Later, after everyone had gone, Agatha stood alone amid empty glasses and rumpled cushions. The house smelled of wine, warmth, and faint chaos. She did not tidy immediately. She sat instead, feet up, Hodge curled beside her, and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Not triumph, not victory. Presence. The kettle clicked off softly in the kitchen. The clock ticked. Ordinary sounds. Reclaimed. Agatha closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "Well," she said aloud, "that's settled." Hodge stretched, jumped down, and knocked over a cushion. Augusta would have straightened instantly. Agatha left it where it fell. She switched off the light and headed upstairs, moving easily through her own space at last. Reclaiming space, she thought, wasn't about pushing others out. It was about staying put. And Agatha Raisin, for once, was exactly where she intended to be. "You might want to open a window in there," Mrs. Blocksby said gently. "It smells of thinking." Agatha paused halfway up the stairs and looked back. "That's not a smell you're usually sensitive to," Mrs. Blocksby smiled, unfazed, and rested one hand on the banister. "Rooms remember things. It helps to let them breathe." Agatha snorted and continued upward. The spare room door stood open. It had been left that way deliberately, as though closing it might invite something back. Sunlight fell across the bedspread in a pale, forgiving stripe. The wardrobe stood empty, its door ajar. The room was quiet, stripped of purpose. Hodge wandered in ahead of her, sniffed the corners, then leapt onto the bed and stretched luxuriously, claws flexing, spine arching. He claimed the space without ceremony. "Well," Agatha said, surveying the room, "someone's moved on." Mrs. Blocksby followed more slowly and leaned against the doorframe. "Cats are very good at that." Agatha folded her arms. "People should take notes." They stood for a moment, watching Hodge knead the bedspread into submission. The house felt different now, not lighter exactly, just settled like furniture that had finally been placed correctly. "I suppose," Mrs. Blocksby said, "that it's strange, having a room empty again after all that intensity." Agatha made a face. "Intensity is overrated. It's usually just bad manners with a vocabulary." Mrs. Blocksby laughed softly. "Interest, too much of it, can turn." "Yes," Agatha said sharply. "I've noticed." She crossed the room and straightened the bedspread, more out of habit than need. Her hands paused. For a fleeting second, something like regret hovered. Not for the person, for the idea, for the possibility she'd briefly allowed. She pushed it away. "I don't like people who mistake attention for ownership," Agatha said. "It's very unflattering." Mrs. Blocksby nodded. "Affection should be generous, not controlling." Agatha shot her a look. "You've been saving that one." "I have," Mrs. Blocksby admitted. They went downstairs together. In the kitchen, Agatha put the kettle on, then stopped herself and turned it off again. "No," she said. "Wine." Mrs. Blocksby raised no objection. They sat at the small table, glasses between them. The late afternoon light warming the edges of the room. Outside, Casserly went about its business. Somewhere a door slammed. Somewhere else laughter drifted. "I expect the village will talk for a while," Mrs. Blocksby said. "Let them," Agatha replied. "They always do. It keeps them off the roads." Mrs. Blocksby smiled. "You were very patient," Agatha snorted. "I was cornered." "That too," Mrs. Blocksby allowed. "But you didn't lose yourself." Agatha considered this. "I came close." "Yes," Mrs. Blocksby said quietly. "That's usually how it happens." They finished their drinks. Mrs. Blocksby rose to leave, pausing to touch Agatha's arm. "Interest," she said, "like love, curdles when it's forced." Agatha held her gaze. "I'll embroider that too." Mrs. Blocksby laughed and let herself out. The house fell silent again. A companionable silence this time. Agatha wandered into the sitting room, switched on a lamp, and sat. She took a cigarette from her pack, lit it, and inhaled thoughtfully. The smoke curled upward, unchallenged. She did not feel triumphant. She felt complete as she ever allowed herself. Hodge appeared in the doorway, stretched once more, then settled on the rug, perfectly at ease. Agatha watched him and smiled faintly. "An empty room," she said aloud, exhaling smoke, "isn't a loss." The kettle ticked faintly as it cooled. The clock marked the hour. Agatha leaned back, alone, unbothered and oddly satisfied.